I'm Lorena Vasquez, and I'm honored to be here today to introduce the interview of the legendary Dolores Huerta, a visionary labor activist, leader of the Chicano civil rights movement, and co-founder of United Farm Workers Union. As a Latina attorney representing workers in labor and employment law, I look up to and appreciate the importance of Dolores Huerta's work and the impact she has had on the lives of so many. I am proud to be part of this program that we hope will help many learn about the important work of Dolores Huerta, a civil rights activist for social change who empowers marginalized communities through grassroots organizing, famously coining the phrase, "Si se puede," yes we can. Ms. Huerta will be interviewed by Los Angeles Superior Court Judge James Lancarte and Judge Mary Lou Villar, both of whom I serve with on the Board of Governors for the Beverly Hills Bar Association. Thank you for watching, and please encourage others to learn more about Dolores Huerta and the important work and impact she has had on our country's history. Thank you.
Well, let's first thank you on behalf of Judge Villar and myself and all the people that are watching for coming in and giving us your time. We want to ask you some questions about the founding of the Farm Workers Union, but first, a lot of people know who Cesar Chavez was and what he was known for, but not everyone knows that you were the co-founder of the Farm Workers Union. We want to share that kind of information with you today. The first thing we're going to ask is, how did you and Cesar, where did you meet and how did you meet?
Well, actually, we met in an organization called the CSO, the Community Service Organization, which was started here in Los Angeles. And it was that organization was founded by a group of labor leaders, Tony Rios, who was with the IUE, Aguila Anaya, who was with the Steelworkers Union, J.J. Rodriguez, who was with the Butchers Union, which today is the Retail Clerks Workers Union. And these were all like people who had been in World War II. They were veterans, and they came back from the war, and they started this group. And the organization was started to try to get a Latino elected to city council. And one of the other members of that group was Eduardo Roybal. And so they did a campaign to get Eduardo Roybal elected, but they didn't win. They lost. But luckily, there was a gentleman named Fred Ross Sr. that had been hired by the LA City Council. Well, actually, they tried to hire him, but they wanted to, let me go back a little bit. So they were having a lot of problems in Los Angeles around that time because, they had these sailors going into East Los Angeles, beating up Mexican kids because they were wearing zoot suits. And so the city council said, well, we have a problem in East LA. And they called in Saul Alinsky from Chicago. And Saul Alinsky had formed a group called the Woodlawn Organization, where they got a lot of organizations together to kind of address the problems in Chicago. So Alinsky told them that the way to solve the problem in East LA was to let the people organize. Well, that's the last thing they wanted. So they turned Alinsky down, but Alinsky stayed in LA, reached out to some of his Jewish friends, like the head of the Sealy Mattress Company. They put money together and they were looking for an organizer. And they found this guy named Fred Ross. And Fred Ross had been instrumental in the desegregation of the schools in Orange County, Westminster. And so they heard about Fred, and they hired Fred Ross to come in and help organize the people in East Los Angeles. So Fred Ross and met these young men who had started this group, the CSO, and Fred taught them how to organize. And they got the first Latino elected to the city council of Los Angeles, Eduardo Roybal, who then became the first congressman to go to the Congress from California, the first Latino. So then they took the organization statewide. Fred Ross came to my town where I lived, Stockton, California. And I went to a meeting that Fred Ross organized. It was a house meeting. And then Fred told us about all of these great things that they were able to accomplish in Los Angeles. And so we started a chapter of CSO in Stockton. Later on, some few years later, I met Cesar Chavez, who was a member of that organization from San Jose. And that's how I met Cesar.
It was here in Los Angeles, right? When you first met him?
No, actually, it was in Oakland.
Okay.
So, you've often talked about the profound effect that Fred Ross had on you and organizing principles and so forth. It's interesting to me, and I'd like to see if you can explain to us why you think it is that when you were initially organizing the farm workers, he did not support you in those efforts.
And who didn't?
Fred Ross.
Oh, no, Fred Ross did support us.
He did?
Oh, yeah.
I thought I saw somewhere that he did not support.
That's information. So, no, well, Fred Ross was, when we started, actually, all of us left CSO, Fred Ross and Cesar and myself, all left CSO at the same time because we had wanted to organize the farm workers group under the umbrella of CSO. But when they had their convention, they voted down our proposal. So Cesar left CSO, I left CSO, and Fred left CSO. The three of us left CSO.
So that's what it was, that he didn't support that. And why do you think that was?
I don't know. Only Tony Rios would know. Of course, he's gone.
Right.
Mhm.
I have another question to ask you about growing up. I saw in one of the documentaries that I saw that you indicated that while you were growing up, you had a dream, which was to be accepted. You also said that at one point you realized that no matter what you did, you could never be an American. Do you still feel that way, given all that you've been through?
Well, all of the discrimination that people of color face in the United States and it's like, and we're going through that today when people of color, there are many corporations are getting rid of their DEI, the diversity and inclusion and equity policy that they have. So it's almost like the message out there is unless you're white or Anglo, that you don't belong in the United States of America. And of course, as a person of color, myself, like many others growing up, you just felt that no matter what you did, what you excelled in, you could never really be accepted as one of quote unquote Americans.
When you and Cesar first formed the United Farm Workers Union, what was your role and what was Cesar's role?
Well, actually, the conversation to start a union happened in Los Angeles.
Maybe that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we were both working here. I was working with CSO. I was the legislative director. I did all of the lobbying, and we passed some really important laws in CSO, like getting rid of deputy registrars when you have to register to vote. And we passed another bill, really important one, to get public assistance for people who were legal immigrants to the United States. Before that, you had to be a U.S. citizen to get any kind of public assistance. So under that law, we were able to get public assistance for the old age pensions, for people that had disabilities, aid to the blind. Yeah, it was really important that we passed that law. And that was one of our major issues that we worked with to CSO. And so I was working out of the Los Angeles office at that time, and Cesar was the organizing director for CSO. But after they turned us down to have the union under the umbrella of CSO, then Cesar called me to his house right there in Boyle Heights, and we had a meeting and said, you know what? If we don't start a union, there will never be one. And then I thought he was joking because he said, I want you to join me to start the union. And I started laughing, and he said, no, I'm serious. Unless you and I start a union for farm workers, there will never be one.
Your mother, I know, was a huge influence in your life, and you said your mother worked out of the home. So for you, it was not unusual to be a working mother, a working woman, and so forth. What did your mother do?
My mother was a businesswoman. My mother had her own business before the age of 30. She set up her own restaurant. It was like a diner. In other words, she changed the menu every single day. And during World War II, when they were taking all the Japanese people and putting them in the internment camps. One of my mother's friends came to her, a Japanese friend, and said, "I'm losing my business. Would you take over my business for me?" And my mother gave up her business, her restaurant, to help her friend. And she took over her business, which was a small hotel, a 70-room hotel.
And where was that located?
The fact that my mother was a businesswoman meant that I had a wonderful a teenage life, you might say. I had many privileges that other people did not have.
Thank you.
Now, everyone who knows you knows that you're the consummate empowered Latina. But when you first began to co-found the union with Cesar, did you always agree with him, or were you already a very strong personality?
Well, I had organizing experience because, I worked with a community service organization before I met Cesar Chavez. And I had started my own farm worker organization, actually two of them before I met Cesar. And one of them we called AWA, Agricultural Workers Association. And then I organized a second group of farm workers, which became the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee. And under that group, I had a Black organizer, an Oki organizer, a Latino organizer, and I needed a Filipino organizer. And people told me about this guy named Larry Ileon. So I found Larry Ileon. He lived in Stockton, where I lived, and I organized Larry and hired him to be part of AWA. So I already had organizing experience with these two organizations before we started United Farm Workers. So I was pretty much, you might say, used to making decisions, and hiring people. And so, and the one thing my mother always told me, always speak your mind, even though it's sometimes uncomfortable for people to hear what you have to say. And you're not always going to be right, but if you have something to say, never be afraid to say it.
So did you and Cesar ever disagree?
Oh, Cesar and I disagreed a lot. When we started the boycott, he wanted to boycott potatoes. And I told Cesar, when people think of potatoes, they don't think they think of Utah, or they think of other states. They don't think of California. So we have to boycott a product that is really connected to California. And of course, California produces over 90% of the grapes for the United States of America. So, and the growers that we were striking, most of them were grape growers. Most of them were. One of the big ones had potatoes also, the Jamar Corporation, and that's why Cesar wanted to boycott potatoes. But I finally convinced him that they had to be grapes.
Well, we know that you didn't invent the word boycott, but you sure made that word known across the country through the great boycott that you're telling us about. Tell us more about how that started.
Well, the way that we were successful in the boycott is that we had farm workers that went to all the cities. So there was a group of farm workers that left Delano, California in a school bus without any heat in the month of January. And they went all the way from Delano, California to New York City. And then from New York City, then they went out to the different boroughs. Some of them went to Westchester, some of them went to Queens, Long Island, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and of course some in Manhattan. And we covered all of the different boroughs and set up boycott committees, organizing people from those areas to help us pick at the stores that were carrying grapes. And then, of course, we expanded into then we sent some of the people to Pennsylvania. People went to Texas, they went to Chicago. And Eliseo Medina, who was one of the farm workers, he was only 19 years old. He headed up the boycott in Chicago, Illinois. And then from Chicago, they spread out to the other states there in the Midwest.
That must have been a frightening experience for somebody 19 years old, like you were just saying, to go to another city with no experience and head up this boycott. How did you prepare them for that?
Well, most of the people that went out, they were either farm workers who had already been on strike for over a year, and a lot of them were young volunteers that came to support the farm workers, and they had also been involved on the picket lines. So they were all pretty courageous when they went out.
Thank you. You were the only woman on the executive board. How did you reconcile that with your work as a feminist?
Well, I had to sort of, you might say, subdue my feminist role during that period of time when we were building the union. But at one point in time, I did say to all of our board members that we had to do more for women. And then it's one thing to, we're fighting for farm workers, but half of the labor force and the grapes are women. And we have to start fighting for women as just as hard as we fight for the farm workers as a whole.
Well, on the subject of the boycott, I have to say that when I was a student at the Claremont colleges, I was on the picket line at the Safeway market in Claremont. So, si se puede.
Well, that's great. Well, I say to all those people that supported the boycott, whether you didn't buy grapes, you didn't eat grapes, or you picketed at stores that had grapes, it was because of you and all of the millions of people that boycotted grapes and boycotted the stores. The farm workers have what they have today. We didn't win with the strike. We won with the boycott.
So following up on Si Se Puede, I think most people believe that it was Cesar Chavez who coined that, but it was not. It was you.
Yes.
And how did you come up with that?
Well, Cesar was doing a fast in Arizona because they had passed a law in Arizona that if farm workers went on strike, that they could go to jail. If anybody said boycott anything, you could also go to jail. And so we were trying to overturn that law that had been signed by the governor in Arizona. And so Cesar went on a fast for a 25-day water-only fast. And we were all organizing there in Phoenix to get people to come and join our struggle. And but when I met with some of the professionals, they said, "Oh no, we can't do this." So the Latino professionals, they said, "In California, you can do all of this stuff, but not in Arizona. In Arizona, no se puede." And my response to them was, "Sí se puede in Arizona." And that is how that slogan came to be. So when I went back that evening to report at the rally, we had a rally every night after we had a mass and a rally where Cesar was fasting there in a place called El Campito outside of Phoenix. I reported that I said to these professional men, "We can do this, si se puede." Everybody jumped up and they started shouting, "Si se puede," So it became a unifying call, and it has been a unifying call ever since then.
Yes, absolutely. It's a rallying cry.
Well, President Barack Obama, who adopted Si se puede as part of his campaign, gave you credit for having invented that slogan.
Well, I'm glad he did.
How was the decision to march to Sacramento conceived and by whom?
Well, we had a meeting. Luis Valdez, by the way, was very part of our leadership team there in Delano, California. So we had been on strike. The strike started in September the 15th or 16th of 1965. And the strike had been going on for almost a year. And we knew that, we were kind of stuck. And Cesar had studied Gandhi a lot, Mahatma Gandhi, and all of the nonviolent tactics that he used. And so we came together as a group, our executive board of the union, and we decided, well, we had to do something different. And the decision came up that we had to do a march. And so that's where the March to Sacramento was planned.
How many people participated in the march?
Well, when the march started from Delano, I think there were like 70 strikers. There were 77 strikers, I believe it was, that started on the march. And then we went through all of the small towns in the valley. We didn't go through Highway 99, went to all of the little small towns because we were organizing the workers as we were marching. And by the time the march landed in Sacramento, I think there were maybe 20,000 people there. It was huge.
And did some of the workers that you met along the way, did they join?
Oh, yeah, people joined all along the way. They went in every town where the march went. People would prepare food. They would prepare places for the strikers to stay. Every single place they hosted them. They were met with bandas. They were met with mariachis. And the march got bigger and bigger as they went along.
When you and Cesar co-founded the United Farm Workers Union, What were the conditions in the fields and in the orchards that motivated you to do that?
Well, farm workers were then earning probably about maybe 70 cents an hour. I believe that our first wage that we were demanding was $1.25 an hour. Farm workers didn't have any kind of health insurance and no type of retirement. They didn't have drinking water. They would have one huge tub of water with 1 cup for a whole crew, and the water would be hot, and they're working out there in the hot sun. There were no rest periods. There were no hand washing facilities and no bathrooms. There were no bathrooms for the workers. And of course, they couldn't negotiate for their wages. I mean, the conditions were deplorable.
1968 was a pivotal time for the union with Robert Kennedy's support. On a personal level, what did that support mean to you?
Having Robert Kennedy come and support the farm workers was tremendous, because when Bobby Kennedy came to support us, that put us on the national scene. And that definitely made our boycott a lot easier, and it gave us a kind of respect, because the growers had this big propaganda saying that we were a bunch of communists and that people shouldn't support us, that we were a bunch of radicals. And when Bobby Kennedy came in person, came to Delano, supported us in New York City, that gave us a lot of legitimacy, and very definitely helped us on an international level, because he was such a huge figure.
Did you or any of the marchers suffer any violence or any law enforcement procedures during the march from Delano to Sacramento?
Well, that first march to Sacramento was really interesting because the police were not very friendly. They would, in fact, when the marchers first started to march out of Delano, the police actually tried to stop the march. They stood in front of the marchers, and it turned out that Bobby Kennedy was still in town. He had been there the day before. He had a hearing about what was going on, and it was during this hearing that he held where he told the chief of police and the district attorney to go read the Constitution of the United States of America. And then right the next day, the police tried to stop the marchers. Robert Kennedy called them. He called the chief of police in Delano and said, "You cannot stop this march. There's no way that you can do this. Tell your men to let the marchers go through."
Is it true that the chief of police wanted to arrest farm workers even before that they did anything that might have been against the law, because he said he anticipated that they might do that?
Yeah, we were arrested many times by the police in Delano, and we had a mass arrest one time, and I think Caesar's wife Helen was one of the people that was arrested, and that is when Bobby Kennedy was referring to them about why they were arresting people before they had committed any kind of a crime.
Did you personally suffer any violence during the march?
Well, we all did. I mean, I had to escape getting run down by cars. We had rifles that were pulled on us many times. Many of the strikers actually got beaten up. The Filipino workers, the first workers that went on strike, they met a lot of violence. And this is one of the decisions why we had to support the Filipino workers, because even though we were not planning to go on strike for another couple of years, we had to kind of change our plan because the Filipino workers were met with so much violence.
Well, you spent some time in the hospital. How did that happen?
Well, in 1988, I was beaten up in San Francisco, and because we were protesting the fact that the candidate George Bush, who was running for the presidency then, had said that there was nothing wrong with pesticides. Cesar had just completed his last fast that he did for 36 days, asking Caesar had just fasted for 36 days because he wanted the American public to know about the dangers of pesticides. And it was after Caesar ended his fast that I went to San Francisco to do a press conference to let people know that what the candidate Bush had said, that pesticides don't harm anybody, that they do harm people. And it was during that protest that we had there in San Francisco that I was beaten up by the police.
And you were in the hospital and had to recuperate for months.
Yes.
And during that period of time, your children were caring for you, all of your children, I believe, and you stated that it was a time of reconciliation. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it took me a couple of months to recover from that beating because I had several broken ribs. They had hit me so hard that the policeman that hit me so hard that they couldn't even find my spleen that was pulverized. But it took a while to get well.
So the 60s was a time of marching for social change. It was a time of the civil rights movement, which you made comments about, the peace movement and Black pride. It was a period of intersecting struggles. Do you see the current state of struggle around LGBTQ, immigration, and DEI issues as a similar period currently?
Well, we know that the equity and the justice that we were fighting for in the Farm Workers Union for farm workers, that hasn't been completed because we only have a couple of states like California and Hawaii where farm workers have full unemployment insurance. They have the right to organize, right to have a union. I think New York State a couple of years ago passed a Farm Worker Bill of Rights, but the rest of the country, farm workers don't have those rights. We see that in our country, the number of people that get killed that are the highest are Black people. After that is LGBTQ people, transgender people that are being killed. So we have a lot of the same things that we started fighting for in the 60s that are still continuing. So we don't have that social justice. We don't have that equity that we have been fighting for. And for women, we still don't have the Equal Rights Amendment for women, something that we're trying to get an amendment into the Constitution of the United States that other countries have, except the United States. All of the developed countries have, as part of their constitution, that women and men are equal, except the United States of America. So we still have a long way to go.
Are you doing any work around these issues with your foundation?
Oh, yes.
And specifically, can you tell us what you're working on?
Well, how can I say we have so many issues? Yeah, yes, we're very much a partner with Equality California here in California, and always making sure that all of the chapters that we form of our organization, that people know that we are pro-abortion, that we are for LGBTQ rights. In any any of the people that we organize, and it takes a lot of education because so many of the people that we organize are Latinos. So many of them come out of the Catholic religion or the evangelical religion. So we have to try to educate them so they will understand that we are standing up for people's human rights. LGBTQ rights are human rights. So
at some point, you left the United Farm Workers Union. How and why did that happen to form the Dolores Huerta Foundation?
well, there was I'll put it this way. Sussan and I had always talked about going back to the community organizing model, the CSO model that we had come out of. Because when you're working in the union, you're only working on for union rights, for workers' rights. But in the meantime, you have all of these things that are happening in the community that people also need help on. And the model that we use in CSO and that we still use in the Dolores Huerta Foundation is where we organize workers, we organize the people in the community and teach them how to fight for their rights. In other words, it's not an advocacy. We actually train them that they are the ones that have to fight for the issues to be resolved. The people in the community, they know what the problems are that they're facing. They know what the solutions are that they need. And they have to understand that they are the only ones that can solve their problems, that they can't wait for somebody to come in from the outside and do it for them. Okay. And so this is why I left CSO to go back to the community organizing model that Fred Ross taught us in CSO.
Well, when you left the United Farm Workers Union, everyone seemed to expect that you would then become the president of the UFW. that did not happen. How and why did that not happen?
Well, when Caesar passed away, I was already 65 years old. I didn't know how long I was going to live, and I felt that I should transfer that power to somebody younger that would carry the union forward. Okay. I didn't know that I was going to live as long as I have lived. Had I known that, I think I would have gone for the presidency.
How young are you?
Well, I'm going to be 95 years old in a couple of months. I stayed with after Caesar passed away, I stayed with the union for 9 years after he passed away.
You touched upon religion a moment ago. Has religion played any part in your life in terms of the work that you do, or just on a personal level?
Well, I think, I'm going to put it this way. My mother, I'm from New Mexico. And in New Mexico, a lot of people have a lot of devotion to St. Francis. And my mother had a lot of devotion to St. Francis. And of course, St. Francis, his message was always to help those in need. And that if you see that someone is in need, you have a responsibility to help them. And even if they don't ask you.
Is that something that you got from your mother as well?
All of our family, my mother taught us that very early. My mother was a very compassionate woman. And when she had her business, when she had a restaurant, she would feed people if they didn't have any money. When she had a hotel, she would house people that didn't have any money. And when my mother passed away, we found out that we had tenants in our hotel that had been living there for years without paying any rent. But so this is the mandate that our mother gave us growing up, and she lived that. She taught us that with her life.
So your efforts and those of Cesar Chavez and organizing farm workers finally resulted in a contract being signed with one of the ranchers, one of the farmers. How did that happen? And who negotiated that first contract?
Well, I became the negotiator for the union, and I believe that the reason that Caesar asked me to be the negotiator is because I had done all of the legislative work in Sacramento. We had passed these bills in CSO that I monitored, through the legislature, disability insurance for farm workers, getting the vote in Spanish and the Spanish language, and so I was kind of used to negotiating with the legislators, and he felt that I could then negotiate with the growers. And what I did is I went to some of the labor unions, the Longshoremen's Union, the Carpenters Union, friends of ours, and asked them, well, how do you negotiate a contract? And the one thing, one of the Longshoremen's Union said, first of all, don't get any attorneys. You do it with the workers and do it directly with the company.
So in 1973, I think, is when the railroad signed a contract with the Teamsters, and there was a lot of violence that erupted during that period, including the deaths of several farm workers. How did that transpire?
Well, we had contracts. Let me go back. After the strike and the boycott, the strike that we had in 1965, and then the boycotts that we had in 1968, we were finally able to sign contracts with all of the growers at the same time in 1970. And we signed 2-year contracts. Well, in 1973, when our contracts came up for renegotiation, the Teamsters stepped in. And it was the Teamsters, and it was kind of a conspiracy there between the Teamsters and the head of the Farm Bureau Federation, and even including some of our politicians. And anyway, so the Teamsters came in and they signed sweetheart contracts with the growers without any elections or anything. And the growers just they signed these contracts without the workers having any say in this. And so we went on a big general strike. We had another big strike in 1973.
Do you think that part of the strategy of the Teamsters was to break up the farm workers union?
What?
Break up the farm workers union? Do you think that was part of the strategy between the Teamsters, the politicians, and the growers?
I do believe that the Teamsters were brought in collusion with the growers to take over those contracts because they never followed up the contracts. They just signed those contracts from one day to the next without the workers' permission or the workers' participation. And it was just deliberately to break our union. And so we had to go on another series of boycotts. But this time it was not only just boycotting grapes, we were boycotting lettuce, we were boycotting Gallo wine.
I remember the Gallo wine strike. How did that begin?
Well, the reason we had the Gallo wine boycott is because the Gallo, the wine company, had also signed a sweetheart contract with the Teamsters Union. And so we had to boycott Gallo wine then, along with all of the other grape growers and the lettuce growers.
So in 1969, Senator Robert Kennedy was running for president. And there's a very famous, well-known photo of Robert Kennedy at the podium. And you're standing right next to him. What was that day like? We know what happened later that evening, but what was that day like, the day that you spent with Senator Kennedy?
When Senator Robert Kennedy ran for the presidency of the United Farm Workers, all of us came out to campaign for Robert Kennedy. And we had farm workers in Los Angeles, not only in East LA, but also in South Central, going door to door, getting people to vote for Robert Kennedy. And it was all out, all up and down the state. We had people working for Robert Kennedy. And of course, all of us were just so happy because we were going to get somebody elected to the presidency that would really stand up for not only for farm workers, but also for people of color. He had done so much work in Bedford-Stuyvesant, even the work that he did in the Appalachia for white people. We knew somebody that would champion poor people. And of course, as we all know, we lost Robert Kennedy, but we were there because we wanted to help him win for the presidency.
People often say of well-known people in politics or in the entertainment industry that they walk with presidents and kings. You've walked with several U.S. presidents, Barack Obama, with Clinton. Tell us about your relationship with U.S. presidents.
Well, I think I've been very fortunate because of my work with the Farm Workers Union, my work with the feminist movement also, to have known several presidents. And I think it's always, I think it's a good token of recognition when you do have presidents that will not only be thankful and that will recognize people that worked for them. They like President Jimmy Carter as one, President Barack Obama, President Biden. Yeah, I think it's very gratifying that they don't forget the people that got them into office when they do recognize who you are. And of course, I campaigned a lot for Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, she did not win. But again, Bill Clinton was another person that we worked for. So it's always good to know that just as an ordinary citizen, that you have access to presidents. I think that's very important to know.
It seems like it was more than just a token because there's a well-known video of President Barack Obama awarding you the U.S. Medal of Freedom, the highest award that a civilian can get. So obviously, you had very good relationships with him and with the other presidents.
Well, initially, I supported Hillary Clinton because I knew Hillary Clinton and before I knew Barack Obama. And I'm really grateful for the Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama because I felt that when he gave me that medal, he also gave it as a recognition for all of those people that are out there doing grassroots organizing, because he was an organizer himself. And he actually took a course in organizing the Fred Ross method of house meetings in Chicago with some of our organizers that we had in Chicago. And so that's really good to know that as a president, he was willing to recognize the importance of grassroots community organizing.
You talked earlier about the fact that you did campaign for various politicians, and you just named a couple of them. It is said that the farm workers pioneered voter outreach, door knocking, talking with people, registering them, and so forth. How did that start?
Well, this is one of the lessons that we learned from Fred Ross Sr. This was back in CSO days, when they did that campaign to get Edward Ball elected to the City Council of Los Angeles and to the U.S. Congress. And these are the lessons that Fred taught us when he taught us how to organize. This was a very, very basic. The outcome of organizing is getting people involved in voting to get representation, because we know that unless we can elect representatives that are going to pass laws and implement laws that are going to help people, then you might say that all of that organizing is for naught. We have to organize at the grassroots level, get people to vote, make them understand the political process, and that is the way that we save democracy.
You mentioned several powerful politicians, and you specifically referred to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's was said about you, quote, Dolores is not afraid to speak truth to power. Do you feel that that's an accurate statement?
Yes, and that is, of course, what we try to teach people with our organizing. And we teach them that every person in public office is your servant, because people in public office are paid with our tax dollars. And so we should never feel that sometimes we have to bow to them. And I'm not saying be disrespectful, but remember, every public servant works for us.
You were at the forefront of the picket lines from the inception, but initially women were not allowed alongside you. How did that change?
Women in the farm worker movement, women were always on the picket lines, because 50% of the workers in the grain field were women. And we love to have the women on the picket lines because they always set the example for any man that might be hesitant out there. When they saw the women out there leading the charge, they made sure that they had to participate also.
Is it true that you were the only woman on the executive board, however?
Yeah, I was the only woman on the executive board for many years, but we finally were able to get more women on the executive board. And today, the head of the farm workers union is a woman.
It's come a long way.
And the majority of the board members are also women.
What is the role attorneys played in the time that you were organizing farm workers, if any?
Attorneys played a very important role in the United Farm Workers. We were able to get attorneys to file a lawsuit to stop the use of the short handle hoe, because there was no reason why farmers had to be bent over, and cutting weeds with short handle hoes. Okay, when they could do the exact same thing with a long handle hoe. But it actually took a lawsuit that had to be filed by attorneys to stop the use of the short handle hoe. Also, during the strike, we had often they took the Virgin of Guadalupe standard, a banner with her picture on it, to the picket lines to try to get the strike breakers to come out on strike. And the growers went to court and got an injunction against the Virgin of Guadalupe.
What?
So we had to get the attorneys to go to court and say that they had to remove that injunction, and also that farm workers couldn't have T-shirts that would say strike on them, because that was, of course, a violation of free speech. But we had to depend on attorneys to be able to go to court and remove some of those injunctions that they had against the union to keep us from making our strikes effective.
What was the basis of the growers not wanting the beat hand to be present?
Well, when you have a banner with a picture of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and you're trying to get the strike breakers that are coming in to break the strike to honor your picket lines, having the Virgin on our side in the banner was a big help in getting the strike breakers to come out and join the picket lines.
So they were basically afraid of that.
Pardon me?
They were afraid of that.
Oh, I'm not going to say that it was that they were afraid, but I think it was more of a respect.
What is the Dolores Huerta Foundation, and what is that foundation about?
Well, our foundation is to go back to the original ways of us building up a grassroots movement by organizing chapters where the local people can have an organization where they can start addressing some of the issues in their community. So we have the local people come together. We do a whole series of house meetings, bring them all together, and then they elect their representatives, the people that they want to, that are going to head up their organization. And then each chapter decides what issues they're going to take on in their community. One of our local chapters that we just organized in Moscow, California, they're trying to get a soccer field for the young people because they're trying to stop some of the kids from going into gangs and things of that nature. So, but each chapter, we had another chapter where they wanted a gymnasium for their middle school. The kids didn't have anywhere to play outside, and so they now have a brand new state-of-the-art gymnasium that they worked for. Another chapter, they wanted to take over the water company in their district that was run by a water company from Texas. So they organized and they were able to take over the water company and elect the members of that community to the board of that water company. So each community takes on the projects that they want to, the solutions that they need in their community. And we never know what that's going to be. We have another chapter. And actually, we had to involve several chapters in this one because so many of the young people were being expelled from the high school. So we went with CRLE, which is an organization of attorneys also. And we filed a lawsuit because the Kern High School District had expelled 2,100 kids in 1 year, mostly Black and brown kids. And we filed a lawsuit against the Kern High School District. We won the lawsuit. And from over 2,000 expulsions, it is now less than 21.
So you're giving these individuals through your organization the tools that they need to get the various issues resolved in their communities.
Exactly.
Is there a program that they go through? How's that?
But once we organize the community, then they start learning what the processes are, so that they can accomplish what they need to have done. And by going through the processes, they're living. You might say they are learning by doing, and this is how they learn how to gain their power.
Dolores, you once said, quote, "All a person has is their story." Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. But I want to believe there's still a lot more story to come. Would you agree?
I would say yes. I would like you to know that I met with the chief executive officer of Target on Monday.
Wow.
To try to get them to reverse their cessation, the DEI policies that they had before after George Floyd was killed. And now that they have reversed them, as have many other organizations. And we met with the CEO asking him if they could continue their policies because we haven't reached equity, yet. We haven't all of those conditions that existed or that exist today, fighting for justice and for social justice, we might say, those conditions still exist. So we still need companies to continue their policies of hiring more people of color, of representing in the community also. And it's not just about their workers. It's about, people are still being discriminated against. People of color, women, our LGBTQ community, our transgender community, all of these issues are still out there. And so instead of stopping their policy that they have to counter all of these isms that we have, then they need not only they need to be continued, but they need to be strengthened. I wish I could say that we convinced them. We didn't.
Yeah, but the fact that you're meeting with the CEO of Target means that even as we speak, you're on the front line of social justice, economic justice. That speaks a lot for what you're doing this very moment today. There's other people out there. You're fighting the war against the diminishment of diversity, inclusion, and equality. I hope you continue fighting that war for a long time to come.
Well, I think the way that we fight these threats to our democracy is by getting more people involved, by getting more people to become activists, getting them involved in the political process, especially in voting and in organizing and in activism. And I'll share some words that Cesar used to share with students. And I know that I know that you'll reflect on this, Jim, because this has been your life. And this is what Caesar would say to students. When you're in school, you write about history, you read about history, you speak about history. But when you become an activist, you make history.
Well said.
During a period of time, you met Gloria Steinem. How was your relationship with her? Did it take you to a different level than you had been at before in terms of women's rights and so forth?
Yeah, Gloria Steinem was a great supporter of the Farm Workers Union in New York City. And because she had such a high profile, no matter where she went, she would always ask people to boycott grapes, later on to boycott lettuce, so she was a great supporter. And when I was with Gloria, it was right in the middle of the third phase of the women's movement. And when she would invite me to all these conventions of women where I could talk about the great boycott. But I was so focused on the boycott, I wasn't focusing on the rights of women. Well, Gloria helped me change that perspective and also bring me around to the fact that women are the ones that are in charge of their own bodies. And so it was through meeting Gloria Steinem that I came to the position of a woman's choice. The woman could choose whether or not to have an abortion. But then I met another feminist leader named Eleanor Smeal. And with Ellie Smeal, who asked me to be on the board of the Feminist Majority Foundation, then I was able to go from the position of being anti-abortion to choice to be, no, we have to support abortion. Women should be able to choose abortion, and it's based on science, and women should have that right to choose an abortion if they so choose. And the one thing I like to say, especially to Latino families, and I like to quote Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez said, respecting other people's rights is peace, and respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. So if a woman or a family chooses an abortion, it doesn't affect your family. If somebody chooses to marry someone of their own sex or live with somebody of their own sex, it doesn't affect your family. So we should respect other people's choices. Respecting other people's rights is peace.
I did want to ask you a question about your children and the work that you did and how that affected your children. You would be gone for long periods of time. You have, I think, 7 children?
11.
11. 7 went with you to Stockton. How
That's the
did,
other one we started with that.
how did that impact your family, your children, in terms of, I'm sure they had to resent you. I'm a single parent, and my daughter has resented my work when I was initially working with legal services. How did you reconcile that?
I have been very blessed because even though my children grew up in real poverty, because in the United Farm Workers, we didn't get salaries, but we just got a stipend. Because the union took care of our expenses, they paid all of our travel expenses, our housing, our food. So we had our basic needs met, but we didn't have cash. We didn't have money. And so my children grew up in that ambience, but it's made them very resilient. And most of them have gone to college, which they did on their own dime. They were able to find scholarships to be able to go to college. I didn't pay for any of them to go to college, and all of my children have been very resilient, I might say, and independent. And most of them have careers. My oldest son is a doctor, graduated from UCLA Medical School. My son Emilio is an attorney. My daughter Angela is a nurse. My daughter Juanita was a teacher. So but they've all been able to find their careers. My youngest son Ricardo is an artist, and an entrepreneur also. So they've all found their own. My son Vincent is a chef. And also a real estate agent, so each one of them found their own strengths and were able to form their own careers. And so I believe that growing up in the union gave them a lot of independence, and they were able to have that spirit of being able to go out there and fight for the goals that they wanted for their lives.
My brother always says that it's through struggle that we make our way.
I believe that.
I think I agree with that. Out of the many and substantial accomplishments that you've had, which do you hold dearest?
Uh, I kind of judge my work by how many people were affected by the work that I did. When I think of my work with the union, I know a lot of the farm workers that work with the union, in addition to having a medical plan, they have a pension plan. And so they get a check every month, once they retire. My work in the legislature, getting the type of assistance I mentioned with when I was in CSO before the union, where we were able to pass these bills that people could get public assistance for the aged and the disabled and for aid to needy children. These are bills that I worked on in the legislature. Being able to vote without having to find a deputy registrar like they do in Texas. Uh, and then the amnesty bill. I worked on the amnesty bill in Washington to make sure that we were able to get amnesty. And we know that there's hundreds of thousands of people that were affected by that amnesty bill that we passed in 1986. Working with Congressman Howard Berman here in California, Senator Ted Kennedy, Schumer to pass that bill. And I think that's probably my biggest accomplishment was passing the Immigration Reform Act of 1986.
Dolores, we have been privileged to have you share your story with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
So I think this is our last question. You have been the face for so many years of what I would term living democracy looks like. How have you continued all of these years with your indefatigable spirit after setbacks and especially during uncertain times like the present?
I really do have faith in the power of the people. And if we can just continue getting everybody to understand that, because I don't care how much money and power is on the other side, if the people come together, they are the ones that can make sure that we can govern, that we have good representation, and that we can keep democracy alive. But we've got to go out there and organize and organize and organize and make people understand that they have that responsibility. Not only do we have the rights, but we have the responsibility of going out there and organizing and electing good representation. And we, the people, are the majority. And when we talk about our Constitution, by the people, for the people, we are the people, and people have to understand and they have to learn that they have power, and they have to learn and understand that they have to use their power. Because if we do not use our power, we will lose our democracy.